Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
Welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yep.
All right, man. I think we've got a fun episode for our audience today. There's been so much talk recently about, are the Lakers, are the Warriors real contenders after the big moves they made at the trade deadline? And it led in our conversations privately about those topics to an interesting idea, which is in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to assume the role of fans / analyst, and we're going to make an argument for how each of these five teams can make the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Denver Nuggets. We're going to make an argument for how each of these teams have a clear path to the Western Conference Finals. And I think part of what makes it interesting is that you and I both believe that any one of these five teams can make it to the Western Conference Finals.
Oh, the West is completely wide open. That's completely. What makes this year so fun, honestly, is, while I generally disagree with Silver on the idea of parity, when you have five teams who have legitimate paths to making the finals, that does make for very exciting television.
Yeah, and when you also can't move three players like Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, and Jimmy Butler and not shake the West up to such a degree where you really don't know where everybody stands. You really don't have a feel for how good a lot of these teams are in, relative to each other.
We had a category 9 earthquake that happened, and So the one team that's at the top in the standings, OKC, stayed flat, and everything else underneath them got taken over by a tsunami, and yes. So now it's a completely different, it's just a completely different environment behind them from the beginning of the year, yes. And I think that it's going to make it a really exciting end of the season. Because teams are gonna have to play themselves into the way they're what their ideal form, what they're gonna be, and you're just gonna have so much uncertainty about teams that could make a legitimate run like Dallas are right now not guaranteed to even make the playoffs or the play-in. So this is just a really exciting fun time for us.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the Lakers. That's top of everyone's mind. Look, man, it's hard for me to contain myself. And it's
every Luka Doncic alley-oop to LeBron, you'll get a text being I think this team might have something here.
Oh, I'm way past that shit. I'm way past they might have something here. Look, man, I'm a reluctant Lakers fan. Always kind of saw them as the evil empire, easy to root against. My favorite player as a kid gets traded to them. I'm reluctantly pushed into rooting for Shaq on the Lakers. He leaves the Lakers. I have a very, very, very long reprieve from my compulsory fandom for the Lakers once Shaq leaves. But then my favorite player, LeBron, gets traded to the Lakers. And I'm once again forced into rooting for the Lakers to some degree. And then, as LeBron's gotten older and Luka's stepped onto the scene, I've, shifted, over time. Kind of went to I like LeBron a lot, but Luka's my second favorite. Now I like him about the same amount. Now I think Luka's my favorite player. And
yes, definitely is your favorite player at this point.
Yeah. But now we've got Luka and LeBron on the same team. And look, man, there are two wolves inside of me. One wolf is sitting there going the Lakers with Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic are an unstoppable force that is going to win a title, giving LeBron 5, Luka his first, and setting Luka up for, success into the future, just as excited as I can be. All right. And then there's another wolf that's well, actually, they don't have a starting center other than Jackson Hayes. And look, I've watched more Jackson Hayes than probably most people. As someone who lives in Baton Rouge, has been to a lot of Pelicans games, and then because I was following the Lakers because of LeBron, I followed Jackson Hayes when he went to the Lakers, and so I'm we can talk more about Jackson Hayes in a minute, but like I know what Jackson Hayes is, and so the actually wolf is like, hey, you got Jackson Hayes as a starting center. Let's pump the brakes a little bit, and then the other wolf's like, well, they're 14-4 in their last 18 games. Most of that, Jackson Hayes has been the primary big in that rotation, and somehow during that stretch, they've been the number one defense in the NBA. And effectively, what is happening? And
seems one wolf's winning a little more than the other one right now.
Well, effectively, what's happening is that wolf started to win, and the actually wolf started to lose. Honestly, before the Lakers traded for Luka Doncic. Once they got Luka Doncic, that actually wolf started to look like one of those mangled grizzly bears that got into a fight with another grizzly bear in a National Geographic documentary. Mm-hmm. And when I say he's on his last leg, that son of a bitch is hanging on for dear life at this point. And I mean,
this podcast does not endorse animal cruelty, just to be very clear.
Well, I mean, well, it depends which wolf you're talking to, because there's one wolf in me that wants to be really cruel to the other. And I'm saying, like, after that Denver game the other day, like, I had to take a few deep breaths and walk a lap or two to like.
I don't know if it worked. I was getting the text messages.
Yeah, no, it worked. You didn't get the ones that were just thought not sent, and but to kind of bring the conversation back to the topic at hand. I mean, honestly, where I'm at with the Lakers is that I 100% believe that the Lakers are contenders in the Western Conference.
Yeah,
and what I need to everybody keeps saying, can they do what they did against Denver consistently? And what they're referring to is defense. I think you and I would both agree that offensively the Lakers are going to be fine. The question is not whether, like, the only question on offense is not whether are they fine or are they going to be legendary? Are LeBron, Luka, and Austin Reeves, with their playmaking and scoring ability all sort of bundled together, is that just going to be an offensive threat that's really insurmountable for most teams? I think that's an interesting question. But before we shift to that, the defensive thing, like, they're not going to do what they did against Denver every night, because Denver is a unique matchup with Jokic, and that was clearly a tailor-made game plan for Jokic. But can the Lakers maintain that level of defensive intensity is a massive question moving forward. And if they can, and if they do maintain some semblance of that defensive intensity, I'm sold enough on the offense to already go ahead and say that Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Austin Reeves, their playmaking and scoring ability, their ability to create open shots for players like Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui Hachimura, and Gabe Vincent. Offensively, I think they're going to be really good. They haven't even begun to find their stride yet offensively. Like that, I think that's coming, and they'll continue to ramp up all the way into the playoffs offensively. If they maintain any degree of this type of defensive intensity, they are absolutely contenders in the West.
Yeah, I think, like, let's just go over what they're doing. Like, because I think it's a really exciting and important way to sort of look at the Lakers right now. So, like, when JJ Redick, first off, like, he's proven himself to be a fantastic coach. And, when he was given this dilemma of, like, you were going to make that Luka trade 100 times out of 100. But, like, he was then given a roster that kind of looks like a bag that's packed for a trip by your toddler, where he's like, he's like, look, man, I brought 5 shirts, no underwear, and one pair of jeans for, a 6-day trip. And you're like, what, you didn't even bring socks. Okay. And he had to make do, because basically he's got a team of Austin Reeves and 4 dudes who are like power forward sized, and then like 1 center, and then a bunch of backup defensive guards and forwards. So what he has done, and I think this was brilliant, is he said, like, we're not going to, we're going to play to our strengths. And so, while Hayes is technically the starter, he's playing kind of a Keith Bogans type of role, when Keith Bogans was on the Bulls with Thibodeau about 15 years ago, where he'll start he'll play the first 5-6 minutes of the game first 5-6 minutes of the second half, and then he gets really sparse spot minutes for the rest of the two halves. And the main lineups that he puts out there are Austin Reeves and 4 bulky power forward size players. You have Dorian Finney-Smith, you got Rui Hachimura, you got LeBron James, and you got Luka Doncic. That lineup, and on defense, to compensate for the lack of height, they have the girth. What Redick has basically said is we may not have a size advantage at the 5, at the center position, but we're going to have strength and size advantages at all other 4 positions with them. We are going to be bigger and we're going to be stronger, and not only that, we have mobile players. So he's having his team swarm the bigger players and try to get the ball out of them by their hands. They did the Jokic. They did some other.
He's doing a similar thing. I actually think that what they did against Denver was a more disciplined version of it, but they're doing a similar thing to what OKC did when they were without Hartenstein and Chet.
100%. And they're a taller version of that team too, which makes
OKC are a bunch of big guards.
OKC was doing the 6'5" version of this. This is the 6'8". There's a big difference in terms of playability.
And it's not just the 6'8". This is the 6'8", 230, 240 version.
260 and 270 in some cases. Rui and LeBron are closer to 260 than they are than to 240. But it's also a lineup that has shooting across the board. It has they're mobile. They can harass. They have players who are all adept. Some better, some much more than others, but are all adept. Except probably for Finney-Smith, but he basically just sits in the corner and shoots threes at this point on that team, which is great because they need that. They just need someone who they can get the ball and just knock down open threes, who are adept at taking smaller players off the dribble and then just sort of shoving them under the rim. And on defense, they don't have a lot of scoring options right now. They have Connect, who can come in and he's sort of like you spin a wheel and either he's going to make 7 for 10 in a span and just take over the game, or he gets taken out of the game after 5 minutes because he's hemorrhaging points by himself. But they have Gabe Vincent, they have Jared Vanderbilt. They have defensive players that can go in there and help make stops and help produce, and they can always keep one of Reeves, LeBron, or Luka in there that can generate offense with the second unit. This is a really solid team. Now, the question that they're going to have is they're having a version of sort of the new coach bounce that teams face, which is that the team changed so much midseason, is incorporating so many new, a completely new offensive strategy, a completely new set of personnel, and so they're trying something that teams have not been ready for them when they're playing them, and so there's the question is, are teams going to find a way to adapt? Of course they will. As they're going to get 30 games of sample size, teams are going to see that there's going to be modifications made. But that being said, I do think that this strategy is something that's going to work well for them, and that and that against a lot of teams, they're going to be able to really take advantage of their size. For example, if you put them against Memphis is going to have a size advantage with Jaren Jackson Jr., but they do not match up well with the remainder of the Lakers team. They do not. They have they're physically they're much smaller. The Lakers can grind them down to a half court game. The size advantage is going to be so much so that I think, and Memphis does not have the personnel that's key to be able to dominate the offensive boards. The games the Lakers have lost.
Well, the other thing too about a Memphis matchup is Jaren Jackson Jr. If you put LeBron on Jaren Jackson Jr., LeBron can stay in front of him. LeBron is strong enough. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not going to bully him.
Yes.
And the advantage you would think you would get from Jaren Jackson Jr.'s height and rebounding, you just don't get. And so
he may be the worst 7-foot rebounder in NBA history. He may.
I mean, yeah. But the truth about this Lakers roster that I think doesn't get mentioned enough when they talk about the size. I think rim protection is a serious concern.
Mm-hmm.
If you can clog the paint, that's all fine and well. Against a team like Boston, that's going to be very difficult.
Yes.
But for the purposes of this conversation, Boston is irrelevant because we're talking about a path to the Western Conference
Yeah.
Finals.
Yeah.
And
This is
so,
very clear. We're talking about making the Western Conference Finals, basically. Like,
so
yeah.
when you look at the teams that we're talking about facing, I mean, Golden State can space you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Dallas, the version you're going to get tonight, can space you a little bit.
But
But
the version
when
they're facing tonight's also just not physically large
yeah,
enough.
the version that you're facing tonight is not a. We're not describing that team as a potential Western Conference finalist.
No.
We're describing the fully healthy Mavericks as
Yeah.
the Western Conference finalists. But I mean, I'm not really worried about OKC spacing that much. I
OKC
think
has the ability. I'll kind of OKC. It's going to be a strength versus strength match with OKC because OKC wants to play small too, and so like they're going to be comfortable in the small matchup. Like
yeah, if you take
yeah,
Hartenstein off the floor, I agree with you about that.
yeah,
But the point I was going to make about the Lakers is like aside from the rim protection part, like they're so girthy and strong. I'm not really worried much about them being bullied by many people other than Jokic, and I think we've seen how they're going to approach the Jokic matchup. Um, the rebounding element isn't like LeBron and Luka are two of the best rebounding ball handlers in the history of the league. So they're actually winning a lot of these rebounding battles. With you
well,
know,
they're gang rebounding.
yeah.
They're doing what you teach in youth basketball. You don't got the height, you put 5 dudes on the boards. Yeah,
So the way that I see the Lakers' path to the Western Conference Finals and potentially representing the West in the NBA Finals is I think a part of it will have to be that you're just now seeing Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves find their stride offensively.
yes,
And that once they find that stride, their playmaking and scoring ability is just going to be entirely too much for opposing teams to deal with. Luka Doncic putting you in pick and roll, attacking the strong side of the court with Jackson Hayes kind of anchoring the middle and
mm-hmm.
forcing somebody to stay there while LeBron stands unguarded in the weak side corner is going to be a massive problem. Austin Reeves being on, at the top of the key or the weak side wing, and catching a pass out of a Luka double team where Austin Reeves is shooting an open three or attacking a closeout. Like, because typically what you're looking at when you have a player like LeBron or Luka collapsing a defense and then kicking it out to an open player is kicking it out to most often a spot up shooter.
Yes,
But sometimes you're looking at kicking it out to a second option scorer who is a serious threat, putting the ball on the ground and attacking the rim as well. What you are rarely looking at is two Hall of Fame all-time great playmakers being on the same team, like LeBron and Luka, where you're kicking it out to LeBron, who could pump fake, attack a closeout, and then get in the lane and collapse the defense for a second time and make an excellent pass. And what you were never looking at is a third option person like Austin Reeves being able to attack a closeout and get downhill, and then once again make an incredible pass either to someone around the rim or along the perimeter. I think that could be really too much for opposing defenses to contend with. Now, the question and what I think they're going to have to do. So the answer to the question is, what's the path forward for the Lakers making the Western Conference Finals? It's going to be a lot of it's going to hinge on JJ Redick and his
mm-hmm.
ability to defensively scheme
Mm-hmm.
against opponents in a way that enables them to play a small, fast, swarming defense that can, against teams like the Nuggets, do something similar to what they did the other night, and against teams like OKC, aggressively close out, rotate, and stay in front of
Yeah.
your player.
The current thing that the Lakers defense is doing really well is they're keeping elite offenses off balance. And what I mean by that is they're frazzling them a little bit. They're swarming them. They're forcing the ball into other players' hands. They're forcing players who are elite in a specific role to do something else. Like one of the things they did really well against the Nuggets is they got the Nuggets offensive setup was such that they were they schemed against it perfectly to the extent that Michael Porter Jr., who was an elite spot up shooter, was somehow the one that was cutting baseline on a lot of these plays, and so he wasn't doing the role they wanted him, and the person that was that was left open was Russell Westbrook. So what the Lakers need to be able to do is maintain their ability to force these mismatches and not let teams start picking them apart. The way to beat this Lakers defense is the same way to beat an elite swarming defense like OKC. It is you have to be incredibly disciplined. You have to have a strategy that lets you get into the offense, finds the mismatches, and basically forces the swarming defense to have to now start backpedaling. You take advantage of the fact that they're swarming to find the open man, find the matchup advantage, to be very patient, very disciplined. And the question is, can the Lakers maintain this level of intensity, maintain their ability right now to knock offenses off balance without exposing themselves and having is someone going to be able to find unlock the key to beat them? I think that they're going to have a lot of advantages in the playoffs. I think that teams like Houston, for example, horrible matchup for the Lakers are a horrible matchup for them. The Lakers are just too big, too strong. They don't have a player at the center position who can just go in there and just dominate, take advantage of matchup advantages. They don't have the offense, just quite bluntly.
They don't even have a center who's significantly taller than LeBron.
They don't have the weapons offensively to compete with them, even if they're at all. It's just that's the Clippers. Another one Zubac is going to be a problem, but the Clippers' issue is they have a really good defense, but they just don't have the offensive weapons to be able to match up to, I think, with Reeves, LeBron, Luka. So I think that there's if they can get one of those in the first round, and then get a second round matchup with a Luka, well, not Luka, sorry, with OKC. I think they could get that's the type of path, which is that they get they right now they're scheduled, I believe, to play. They're in I think the third or fourth seed. So you would playing someone like the Clippers in the first round, then playing OKC in the second round. That's a path. Or playing or playing Minnesota in the second round. One of those two teams, you can easily. It's not a really hard. What I'm trying to say. Inartfully, if I might add, it's not really hard to create a path for them to get there. They have they match up well enough against the majority of these teams to be able to.
It's not hard to paint that picture of them getting there. Partly because offensively, you expect them to be extremely potent.
That's really.
I mean, the question. And all of it just seems counterintuitive because you look at Luka. And while I'm someone who thinks the narrative about Luka's defense gets overblown at times, I'm fine with admitting Luka's not an elite level defender, unless elite still would be a stretch. He is a good defender in certain situations. Luka is thought of as a point guard because he plays that offensively, but he is built like a power forward. Yeah. And functions as a defender more effectively as a power forward than as a perimeter defender. And so if you isolate Luka on a quick attacker from the perimeter, Luka can get cooked that way. But you look at Luka, you look at LeBron, you look at the lack of center, you look at Austin Reeves, and the intuition is this is a very bad defensive team. And the puzzling thing is that they just haven't been. And I think one potential explanation I have of that is if you watch the Denver game, apart from the scheme and the way they bottled up Jokic and all that stuff, one of the things that stuck out to me is the amount of buy-in you had from Luka on the defensive end.
Yes.
And if I'm sure a lot of that is being motivated by the fact that he's on a new team. I'm sure a lot of that is being motivated by the fact that playing alongside someone like LeBron James, there's a level of accountability that Luka probably has never had in his career. A significant portion of that is motivated by the way that Dallas handled the trade. And I think
they spent 3 weeks not calling him a fat ass, and more importantly, they just called him a loser.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing like in the grand scheme of things, there's nothing worse you can call someone than just like they're basically saying that despite all of his talents, this man is a loser.
Yeah.
He is not, and like he's had to listen to this shit. Like if that's not going to motivate him,
I have zero doubt about whether he'll be motivated. I mean, he's that type of competitor.
Yeah.
And if anybody had in 3 games convinced themselves that he would not be, I think the Denver game showed you he's coming around. So I think you and I both agree.
Yep.
That the Lakers' offense is going to be potent, and it's going to pose significant challenges to opposing teams in the Western Conference. The question mark that the Lakers have to answer in order for them to find themselves in Western Conference Finals is going to be at the defensive end. And effectively, the answer that they need to give is that they can maintain. It'll be different schemes than what you saw against Denver, but that level of intensity. And at the end of the day, they need to maintain the same level of defensive prowess that they've had over these last 18 games that have him ranked as the number 1 defense in the NBA currently, or over that stretch. If they can do that, I don't think they can just make the Western Conference Finals. I think they can represent the West in the finals.
Yeah, the best way to look at this team, honestly, is through a lens of a really good college team that has specific areas. Like a lot of college teams are really good, and then you'll look at the height of their center, and he's 6'8", and they have to create. They will run schemes specifically designed to try to minimize the impact of their glaring flaws. The Lakers have the advantage that they have very smart players. Like that cannot be underrated. When you have smart players, they are able to oftentimes find ways to mask their deficiencies within a really good greater defensive scheme. Now, the question is we don't have enough data yet to determine whether this is something that it works really well at first and then starts to wane over time as other teams see it more often. That does happen. We've seen that this year already with OKC. As we mentioned this earlier, at previous episodes, the first go around, their scheme works really well. We're seeing the second go around, and their record's starting to dip a little bit because of it. So we just don't have enough data. But the early returns on this team, I mean, what do you have to complain about? You got nothing to complain about. If you're trying to say based off the data we've seen that this team can't win the Western Conference, then you're lying to yourself because everything they've done so far is to prove it.
That's my thing, is like Brian Windhorst on the Hoop Collective podcast. I reluctantly listened to that last night and was forced.
Must have been suffering from severe bout of insomnia.
I was. And I was forced to suffer another insufferable Tim Bontemps rant. But the thing that Brian Windhorst brought up was the fact that the Lakers are 14-4 of their last 18 with the best defense in the NBA over that time span. And I'm fine with someone saying yeah, but that's because, and then providing an explanation for it. What irks me is that Tim Bontemps refutes it with the confidence of someone who is more convicted in their beliefs than anyone you have ever met. And the explanation he gives is hand waving. It's just not real. And I'm sorry, 18 games in the NBA is a reasonable sample size.
Yeah, it's almost 20% of the season.
So
my
thing is if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at 18 games, I'm fine with admitting I don't understand how the fuck they're doing it over that stretch without AD, and also since the trade, not just without AD, without Max Christie, who's a good perimeter defender. And I think
the numbers this entire year, the advanced numbers, which take with a grain of salt always, said that AD's impact on the Lakers on defense was negative Like
Yeah.
they were consistently saying this, and people were just waving it away, saying he's a really good defender. The thing to go back to is there's misconceptions about how this team is talked about with regards to its size compared to what is actually talked on the floor. They are very tall, except at the center position. That is the fact. And like teams historically have been able, if they have the right personnel, to overcome that. You know that.
And part of that too is like, take for example, like what I said earlier about OKC and about spacing, and you said, well, I think they can do it, but I think both of us meant like that can happen if you take Hartenstein off the floor.
Yeah.
And and I think that me and you both believe that what you're going to be able to do if you're the Lakers is more or less play Hartenstein off the floor. I think you can definitely do that in a matchup against Memphis with Edie.
Oh, you can't play. It'd be very difficult.
And so part of the Lakers' strategy will also be making you pay for having some of these guys on the floor that cause them problems on when the Lakers are on defense, cause them problems when the Lakers are on defense. Play them off the floor on the other end.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's the old Phoenix Suns. I mean, this is the thing that, I mean, date back the old time, but this is what the Phoenix Suns, when they would start Amari Stoudemire at center, would do. Stoudemire is 6'8", 230, like he can jump, but he was never big enough to play center, especially in the era of, the roaming behemoths. Roaming, like my son would be so mad at me for not knowing the name of the big tall dinosaur. I think they're stegosauruses, but luckily he doesn't watch this podcast yet. But
those are Baronosauruses. Stegosauruses are the one with spikes on their back.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. But if you all you got to do is make the trade off unsustainable. Like if your big guy's having success on offense, but he is hemorrhaging more points on the defensive end, then you cannot play him, and that's what they're going to bank on. This is a really good team.
Yeah, you put Hartenstein in pick and roll with Luka, force him ISO'd onto Luka, and force the defense to help a ton off of Luka drives, which turn into passes to LeBron and open shots and easy lobs and stuff like that. And suddenly he's not on the floor. I agree with you. It's easy to build the case for him. You just want to see a little bit more.
Yep.
All right, moving on to Golden State. Golden State.
Another team which detonated itself at midseason. Just press the implosion button and like we got to do something big, and they did.
And it's worked out extremely well. Jimmy Butler has been a perfect fit in Golden State. Honestly, I think I thought the fit with Jimmy and Steph made sense. The way that them two play. I think that with Steph and Jimmy, it's also clear, like being able to have someone like Jimmy Butler on the floor while Steph's getting a breather is a big deal. Someone who moves off ball as well as Jimmy Butler does with Draymond Green on the floor is also an obvious fit. The thing I did not think about, one other thing that seems obvious to me is that if you ask me to name the two best players in the NBA just mucking up a game, I think I would immediately go Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler. Mm-hmm. Now those two guys are on the same team, and I think that can cause a problem for young teams like OKC, Houston, and Memphis. But the one thing I didn't think about that Tim Legler mentioned on the All-NBA podcast that I thought was interesting, that has a huge impact on Golden State and Steph Curry. Jimmy Butler's ability to get to the foul line. And, I mean, you can talk obviously about the points that generates. But even more than the points, Legler points out that a trip to the foul line is about 90 seconds in real time. Mm-hmm. That's 90 seconds Steph Curry standing at half court taking a breather. Mm-hmm. That's 90 additional seconds Steph Curry's getting a blow on the sideline. And I think Jimmy Butler's getting to the foul line something like 8 times a game.
Yep.
He is
9.5 times right now. Game with that's a huge difference. He's the only, like, this team had to work so hard to score points before. Like that, that they did not have someone outside of Curry who was being chased, like Curry looked like he's playing flag football out there with like three guys just chasing him around nonstop. Like, it was like, it would be very funny. And then like you get the ball and then the other person would then try to pass the ball back to Curry, who would then be chased around again. Like it looked, so they needed someone who could go out there and be like, score. And they've needed that for years. They needed that honestly since Klay Thompson hurt his leg and became more of a standstill shooter, not someone you could give the ball to and he could just go to work. That is, sometimes you need someone who can score in a different way than your scheme plays. Schemes are great, but high level NBA matchups are about ability to counter. And if you only can play within one scheme, if someone can basically, can neutralize your scheme to a degree, it makes it really difficult for that team to be able to win a matchup, even against inferior opposition. So he's made a big difference there. He also is a player that he can score on his own, but he's a very willing passer. He immediately runs into there. He's he's a quick processor, which is one of the things, like Golden State style, for better or for worse, requires you to make decisions within like a half second. It's a zipping, and that's why you see a lot of like the wild turnovers sometimes, because when it gets out of whack, they start playing like the ball just gets really loose and like that. But
for all of Jimmy Butler's antics and the criticisms you would want to give him, I mean, I think the best way to describe Jimmy Butler is he is just a really good basketball player. He's a good defender. He's a good passer. He moves off ball. He can attack off the dribble.
Player. For all of his personal antics about me, I want what's best for Jimmy. He's always played team basketball to a degree where he's even sublimated himself to like his personal stats.
He's one of the best team players in the country. In the NBA.
And like he's never been about like the personal accolades. As long as he gets paid and he feels he got a chance to win. So he's a great fit right now. The most exciting thing to me about this team is that they're playing this well and they don't even have Kuminga back yet. And and again, like one of the things that Butler allows them to do is this. They've also had some other things. Quentin Post has gone in there. He's like very he goes in there and takes 9 threes in 10 minutes and then gets out of the game. I very much enjoy that, where it's like, this is now Quentin Post time. He's now the centerpiece of our offense. And everyone's like, okay.
And Quentin Post has been fine. I'm
not making fun of him. I just find it like what's really refreshing about it is that this is a guy who was not an NBA roster this year. And then he gets 10 minutes where he is not just on the court. He becomes the centerpiece of the Warriors offense for those 10 minutes, where it's just basically like running actions to get Quentin Post 3-pointers. And he is very comfortable taking 7 shots in 10 minutes, and then he goes out, and then they go about their day. It's like they're a deep bench still. They bring Post or Looney off the bench. Looney comes in there and he wrecks second units on their offensive boards. Moody's now getting more minutes. Like, this is a deep team. And I think that one of the benefits it's going to have is that it now can play multiple styles. They're no longer so small that unless they're playing like a Denver, which is just so big, it's like Jokic is just so big that and like so much bigger than them that I think he really provides them with significant issues. They're going to be they're no longer so tiny that they're out of games before they start in a lot of cases, which was what to me when I watched a lot of games earlier this year. It's like, this is great, but Minnesota is a foot taller than them at each position, and what are we even doing here? And so I think Draymond's already talking they're going to win the title. That's probably it's a little ambitious at this point, but the way you see their path, they get into the playoffs. They play OKC, someone like OKC, a team which they can play their small ball lineup through. And OKC's strength is small ball, but this is the Warriors have never been a team that has had problems playing teams that want to play small ball offense. That's not been the way to beat the Warriors. The way to beat the Warriors is to basically overwhelm them with size. And so you play them, you play a team like the Rockets in the first round, a team which cannot overwhelm you with size. You get a favorable second round matchup against another team. I don't know if I would favor them against the Lakers, but that's another team where the Lakers' size, height wise, is Butler and Draymond Green are going to be able to stand up, for example, with LeBron and Luka about as well as possible. Like they're gonna be sturdy enough to be able to hold up and not like immediately make this a matchup, which is in the that's gonna like it's over before it starts. And they get hot. They shoot well throughout all these rounds. They're able to get in their offense. Kuminga excels in a bench role. And they are able to avoid Denver and other teams. Maybe I would probably throw the Timberwolves in there, another bad matchup for them, just because they're so big that it just they're big and they're mobile. Just to be honest, like I think presents some off problems there too.
I think one of the things that's interesting about the Western Conference is I don't believe in the Grizzlies or the Rockets. A full strength Clippers team heading into a playoff series is not going to be an easy out.
No, and it's a bruising series for whoever gets it.
Yeah. If they're full strength and you've got
they'll win games 90-85. Like
they grind you. They grind you hardcore. Like,
and they play really slow. You just can't. You're not going to score 120 on them.
Yeah, it'll travel in the playoffs. The thing about like the Nuggets. I'm sorry, the Grizzlies, the Rockets. I look at those young teams and you see their weaknesses. And I just think a team like the Warriors probably goes in there and schematically is able to beat those teams. But if they ever find themselves in a bind, I think the Warriors just muck it up.
Yep.
And they win that series. But as you look at the Western Conference standings, right now the Warriors are 1 game back of the 6th seed. Right?
Yeah.
And while the Rockets in the 5th seed have a 5-game lead on them, the Rockets are 3-7 in their last 10 and have really been struggling. Whereas the Warriors are like 4-1 over their last 5. And that's during the Jimmy Butler era. And I think that the Warriors are going to be ascending. I would not be surprised at all to see 3 teams nobody really thought about as being contenders a third of the way into the season, and the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Timberwolves all being right there near the top come the postseason.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of how jumbled up they are and how much potential they have, and the fact that they're all kind of finding their stride right now. I think that the Timberwolves are a team that we possibly should have included in this list of like building a path forward for them. But I think some of what they found in their stride is the fact that injuries have removed Gobert and Julius Randle from the lineup, and they just play better without those guys.
Injuries have forced them to play their best lineup, which they don't want to play, which is kind of a big issue.
But transitioning, I think you and I with Golden State both agree, like you had to bring somebody in who could give Steph Curry a break. Yes. And Jimmy Butler does that in a couple of ways. As a scorer who can help space the floor for Steph Curry when they're sharing the floor together, as someone who can get to the free throw line, and as Tim Legler points out, extend the breathers that Steph Curry is getting, either standing at half court or sitting on the bench. And then when you're in the non-Curry minutes, you have a legitimate offensive threat on the floor in Jimmy Butler. And just in terms of the fit with the team, the Warriors have always been a team-style system. That the team style was to generate shots for Steph and at one point Klay Thompson. And now you're seeing sort of a team style system that Jimmy Butler's team style of play fits into perfectly, but it provides a wrinkle that they haven't really had before, where you've got this sort of in and out play, where there's this historically, just unmatched threat from the 3-point line in Steph Curry, with a guy who cuts off the perimeter like Jimmy Butler better than anybody. And a player like Draymond Green sort of facilitating that and playing traffic cop and distributing the ball. I think it's an excellent matchup. I think they're a good defense. I agree with you that when Kuminga comes back, that adds a whole nother wrinkle. And they can go toe to toe with anyone.
100%.
I
think they have like a full strength Mavs team is probably too big for them. But the reality is, it's with where these teams are right now. It's very unlikely that they would face a full strength Mavs team until the Western Conference Finals. So
Yeah, I actually think that what you're going to see is the Mavs go down and the Warriors go up.
yes,
And like, I actually think a very likely outcome is going to be the first round series between the Mavericks and the next team on our list, which is Oklahoma City. I
yeah,
think that you could see the Mavericks, as a result of injuries, really struggle
hmm oh yeah,
for the rest of the
100%.
regular season. I don't think Anthony Davis is going to be back in 2 weeks when he was said to be reevaluated. I think there's an element of that's kind of PR and them trying to mitigate some of the fallout from the Luka trade. But I do think they'll get him back before the
Yeah,
playoffs, most likely, and they'll have Gafford and or Lively back, even
yeah,
if they don't. So, like, you're going to see a fuller strength Mavs team than what you have right now. But I think that they will probably be in playoff contention,
yeah,
and as a result, face either the 1 or the 2 seed.
yes.
I think that there is a scenario where the 2 seed is the Lakers, and you could see a first round series between the Lakers and the Mavericks. I think it kind of depends on how rough things are for the Mavericks.
You're going to see the first ever series where Mavs fans are just going to be burning cars regardless if they win or lose every game. They're just going to be burning cars regardless because they don't, yeah.
They're just rioting no matter what. And
yeah.
yeah, but I think you could potentially see that series. I think you could also potentially see a Thunder Mavericks series. With the Thunder, I mean, like, building the case for the Thunder making the Western Conference, like, I mean, it's not hard to build the case. You just sort of look at the Western Conference and you say, like, they've been the best team in the Western Conference all year long. It's hard for me
Yeah.
to muster the intellectual and emotional integrity to make this case because I am programmed to root against the Oklahoma City Thunder.
This is why I wanted to do this exercise to begin with, because I just wanted to let you speak for 20 minutes about and make
No,
the case
I'm
for the
not. I'm
Thunder,
not
because
going
I
to
don't
do
know if
that.
you
I'm going
could
to
possibly get
exercise.
there.
I'm going to exercise more discipline than that. Uh, the Oklahoma City Thunder are a great defensive team that play with a lot of intensity and they swarm. They have one of the most elite perimeter defenders in Lou Dort. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a machine who can score at will, particularly in the mid range. And they're good, I guess.
This sounds like the comments that like the PR person has written when a celebrity couple is breaking up and they release a
I just
joint
had
statement.
notes I read
Yeah,
off.
yeah. Where Ben's like, he's a wonderful person and we wish him the very best in the future. Yeah, yeah. But no, I think like, the thing with the Thunder is their baseline play is the best in the league in terms of like if you just roll team out night to night, they have the least amount of variance in terms of their performance. They come out there, and if you do not match their effort in that night, they will steamroll the hell out of you. And they have great defenders 1 through 5. They have good shooting, pretty much throughout the roster with a couple of exceptions. And they play hard and they're well coached. The problem with this team is the same, that I have had is I still have doubts about their ability to. They're not a very. They have weaknesses I don't know how that they overcome. Like I think there are certain matchups that are just bad for them, and I think honestly, in a weird way, they want to play small ball. In a weird way, the changes that happened in the Western Conference made more teams more comfortable playing small ball than before, and made other teams like very, very, very large. Like the Dallas Mavericks to a degree where it's just like they're just huge compared to OKC, and it's just going to be hard. Like that, I think that just presents other issues, like a separate set of issues. So, for one, like the best way to put this is like let's say there's a situation where like there's a really easy case. So let's say they face Memphis in the first round. I think they beat Memphis relatively easily. In a situation like that, they play Houston. I think they win that matchup. and then they get a second round matchup against a team like Golden
Well,
State.
I mean, the teams they're most likely to face. I mean, I think you could see Houston fall all the way down into that mix. The Kings.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think the Grizzlies are going to fall that way. There's enough volatility with the Timberwolves. I mean, Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle returning, I think
yeah.
could throw a wrench in their progress.
Hmm.
And you could see them kind of hovering around in there. And then you also have the possibility that, I mean, if the Suns can get on a little streak, then they can slip into the play-in as well.
Yeah, I think that they would crush the Suns. I think they would crush the Kings. I think they just have too much. Like
I
they're
agree with all that.
yeah. So like I think that and the Mavs would be the Mavs would literally be unfortunate for them. Like just from a perspective of the Mavs, this Mavs team is not a number 8 seed. Like put it
No,
that
I
way.
agree. I agree.
And so like that would just be like really fucking bad luck for them, and like that would be a really tough series. But like there's also the situation that like they're going to be playing a Mavs team that's still going to be really filling each other out, and they're so like it's like that would present some like situation. Like the Thunder are not a team you want to be figuring out your chemistry against. Put it that way, because you're like they're just really they're like the old Spurs with the Duncan era. The Spurs were always here, and that like they were able they didn't, and like for a long time until they got Kawhi Leonard, their ability to go up and down was limited. But like you had to basically get above them. If you were able to rise above their level, they didn't really have a lot of counters. But their level was so high that they would get to the semifinals every year because there were not their other teams did not have the like their ceiling was not high enough to reach
Yeah, no,
them.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. I think that like what you're saying is the way I would put it is that the Oklahoma City Thunder have a high ceiling.
Yeah.
It's just exactly what that ceiling is because they play at it almost every night.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
part of my concern, I hate using that word. I'm not concerned. Part of the problem I have with the Oklahoma City Thunder is that I think that their ceiling looks much better relative to other teams in the regular season because other teams in the regular season don't take the regular season as seriously as the Thunder do.
Oh yeah.
And so they kind of go into the playoffs with sort of inflated stock.
Yep.
Not to say they're not a good team, but I just think that they have
Chris Paul syndrome.
weaknesses. Yeah, they have weaknesses that once you get into a playoff series, the lack of ball handling, the lack of playmaking, if they're going to have the perimeter shooting they need on the floor, the lack of particularly girth that's going to be exposed by this team, I think all become problematic. Now, with that said, I think one of the interesting things about the Western Conference this year is that these teams are so jumbled up
Yes.
that the Thunder could actually still be better and win any series and overcome those weaknesses.
That was the other thing I was going to say. So like even in the bad matchups, like for them, bad matchups. Again, like the like Ben said, we don't have reservations or what was your concerns? We have like qualms is a better example of the word we want to use. But even taking that into account, there's not really a matchup where like I would go like let's just cancel the series. This is over. Like the Lakers, I think would be a tough series. The Mavs full strength would be a tough series. But like if you were to say like, can you find a way for them to win both those series? Yes, yes, I can. I can envision scenarios. I just
You've got a player on their team who's literally unstoppable.
Yeah. They have it. They're going to go into every series with the best player on the court. Like at least arguably, they can make a serious argument like that. It's and they have a team that plays really well together, deep. They are a team that like they're not necessarily, as I mentioned, they're not really flexible like matchup wise, but they're really redundant. So like you lose Alex Caruso, they're not gonna miss a beat. For example, like that.
Let me say this. I like, God damn, this is so hard. The argument I would make for the Thunder that I think like gets them through potentially any series is, yes, I agree with you that the Nuggets Jokic poses a serious threat.
Yes.
I actually don't think the Nuggets really have anyone who's a good matchup for Shai.
No.
And I think that Oklahoma City can do more with Jokic than the Nuggets can do with Shai.
Yep.
That's one argument I would make. I think the same is true with the Lakers. The problem I would say for example with Oklahoma City, I think Lou Dort is actually a better matchup for Luka than anything LA can throw at Shai.
Oh yeah, and in fact, like the type of player this LA team has struggled against, even like in the small sample, is the speedy guards.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
like because they don't have the.
Yeah, he's just
Yeah,
so shifty and he's
yeah,
long and he is automatic from the mid range. So
yeah.
like,
It's
yeah,
LaMelo Ball who's like making them look like like he's playing and one,
yeah, yeah.
and one basketball.
And I think like some of that is going to be corrected, but like Shai's on a different level than
Yeah.
LaMelo Ball. Like I think Shai will be a major problem for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think Dort is about as good a defender as you can find to match up with Luka. The problem I think that the Oklahoma City would have with the Lakers is that I don't think Luka has any problem like drawing Lou Dort out or attracting a double team and then giving the ball to LeBron James, who at that point, I don't know who the great matchup is against LeBron James for Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna have to draw to their bench for that one. Like that's just gonna be and there's you're gonna have to hope like Williams is small, but he's got a really good low center of gravity. That's like that. Like he's hard to move. And so you got that. You would throw Caruso at him. You probably throw a bunch of looks, but like he is an issue. Like they don't have a perfect fit.
And then once you solve that, like you're just dealing with Austin Reeves now. Like so, I think offensively, like the Lakers are just positioned in a way where they can pose problems for you that kind of aren't solvable. It's just what can you do to the Lakers on the other end of the floor that still remains to be the question. But like I see OKC as being able to overcome any team in the Western Conference. I'm just not convinced
They will.
of
Yeah.
their. Yeah, I'm just not convinced of their. The coronation that's coming that many people believe is en route. But one of the teams we've mentioned frequently as a matchup problem for OKC is Dallas. And there's no point in even really talking about the Dallas roster as it's presently being rolled out because I mean they've been plagued with injuries the whole year. I mean they're stepping into Memphis Grizzly level territory from last
Levi
year.
made his NBA debut last night for them, I believe.
Well, look, man, if John Morant, I'm sorry, not John Morant, if Kyrie Irving goes down with an injury, they have fully assumed the bad luck that the Memphis Grizzlies had last year. That's how close they are to just it being as catastrophic a season as it possibly can be. And like that doesn't even mention the fact that you traded away your generational five straight All NBA first team guy. But with Dallas, I mean, once again, the argument for them being in the Western Conference Finals is simple. I mean, you have incredible versatility, with the ability to roll out at any point one elite big and then another like really good big alongside Anthony Davis and Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively once they're fully healthy. I think there could be some serious question marks about whether either of those guys will be back to start the postseason. Referring to Gafford and Lively.
And the first step with Dallas is we have to assume they're going to be fully healthy.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
okay, so like if they're fully healthy, like I mean, once again, the explanation of how they make the Western Conference Finals is kind of simple. I mean, you're just able to completely overwhelm teams with size and a presence in the paint and rim protection and good defense. I mean, PJ Washington, Max Christie are two really good perimeter defenders. You've had to sacrifice some of PJ Washington's perimeter defense and more recent games because you don't have any rim protection back there and you need PJ Washington to kind of be around the rim. But Max Christie kind of compensates for that. Najee Marshall's a good defender. Like
Caleb Martin's a good defender. Like they have a full complement of wings they can just trot out and throw at you for size. Yeah.
What's his name's a good defender? Kessler Edwards.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a deep bench that provides them with good defense and a lot of versatility. Klay Thompson can get hot shooting the ball, and then Kyrie Irving is Kyrie Irving. I mean, he is one of the best at creating a shot for himself, and Kyrie Irving's an elite shooter. Really, honestly, I think the question mark that I have about Dallas really is kind of twofold. First is I need to see more than 3 quarters against a small Houston team to know that the 2 big lineup's going to be as good as it was in that first game.
Yes.
And then the second question I have is I need to see how Kyrie Irving is going to hold up. Being the primary ball handler and first option scorer on that team and play creator. Like they need so much from Kyrie Irving at 32 years old, and he's already a smaller guard. I think the consequence of this could be that you see a tick down in his efficiency. And certainly worst case scenarios, he's more susceptible to injury.
There's not a real way where you can get around that. He's being asked to do so much more. Teams have identified like their best strategy is basically trying to harass him and force him to expend way more energy. Like his efficiency,
force the ball out of his hands too, and then you expose like a lack of ball handling and playmaking.
That's exactly it. So that's their big like glaring weakness. Their secondary ball like playmaking and like ball handling is weak, especially with the starting lineup they play.
It would be like, dude, if gearing up for the playoffs, if they got fully healthy and they were to have like a younger, like big ball handler who could create a shot for himself and anyone else on the floor, they'd be very well positioned heading into the playoffs. It's unfortunate they don't have anybody like that in Dallas.
Yeah. No, and they also went from last year their calling card being that they may not be the most complete team, but they always had basically the best player on the court. And they will never, and it's the top teams, they will not have the best player in the series. And it's top teams NBA. At no point, and none of the matchups, unless there's just a very weird thing that happens and like a Memphis ends up in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, think about like another thing about Luka Doncic and the style of play that you saw in the postseason last year that I think is really important to mention about one of the differences between him and Kyrie Irving is, and now the Lakers will benefit from this, is I think you and I both agree the best player in the league for guarding Luka Doncic is Lou Dort.
Yeah, I would say so.
And I think we would both agree that Lou Dort did about as good a damn job as you could expect him to do against Luka in that playoff series last year.
Oh, yeah.
Luka still averaged, like a 30-point double-double in that series.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is this, even more than the stat line. If you're watching that series, one of the things that should jump off is Lou Dort did an amazing job. Luka was still so good. He forced OKC to play Dallas' style of basketball.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you have a player in Kyrie Irving. He's just too small. And so I don't think that he can force you to play Dallas' style of basketball. He can still create for himself and get an open elbow jumper or, knock down a three or something like that. But if a team decides to scheme against Anthony Davis and let Kyrie cook, if you did that with Luka, the problem is Luka would attack your scheme and force you to come off of Anthony Davis. He would break your defense down. I don't know that you're going to get that from Kyrie.
Well, he also doesn't have a unique scheme, style of play. Kyrie's just a great guard. He doesn't like.
No, I agree.
Kyrie teams don't play Kyrie style. They just, they play. And
Kyrie plays Kyrie style, and there's everybody else watches it.
And that's a big issue. I also I believe that Davis and like Gafford and Davis and Lively will be a very good defensive pairing.
Oh,
We
100%.
not
There's
we
no question about that.
yeah. There shouldn't be, but like there's all like we haven't seen him up against Jokic. We've seen like there is we haven't seen we haven't seen him against these big players because they haven't played yet. And the problem with that is like you are going to ask this team with great defensive players to go into the playoffs with no experience playing together. Like
running kind of a complicated
running a complicated system. It's just
where
it's
the
a very
spacing is really screwed up.
spacing screwed up. You're going against bigs who pass well and are going to like exploit any type of like uncertainty about where I'm supposed to be. They're not like Lively can't like run like he can't do walkthroughs right now. He cannot walk. So like it's not like they can get they can just run through the plays together. Like Gafford cannot walk. They're not participating and they're not getting experience knowing together. They're going to basically be going into like that Phoenix team a couple years ago where they like Durant got hurt and like that, and they just had never played together and got into the playoffs, and it looked like you would expect it to look like. It was just a bunch of guys playing one on isolation together. And so I think like that's an underrated part about all this. But yeah,
and in addition to like how good Anthony Davis and Daniel Gafford and Lively will be as sort of a twin-headed monster under the basket defensively, like in addition to that, Max Christie and PJ Washington will be very good perimeter defenders.
Oh yeah.
Like Dallas's defense will probably be fully healthy the best defense maybe in the NBA.
Yeah, Dallas is the Goliath of a team. What they are banking on is they don't have the top end star that's in like the top 5 of the league. What they're banking on is their team is so complete, their team is so physically dominant, their team is so good defensively 1 through 5 that they are going to be able to just overwhelm and grind teams to dust. That is they fully healthy. This team is a monster of a team. It's going to be like really hard for other teams to play against, and you're going to come out with a lot of bumps and bruises, like that. But the problem is like they haven't played they are starting 2 new pieces, one of which is probably the primary offensive option. A lot of these players haven't played together before for a large experience of time. A lot of the mainstays from last year have been hurt so much this year they haven't even played with the players who are now veterans on the team, like Najee Marshall, who's also like everyone's missed a lot of time. There's not a lot of chemistry. That's an under discussed element about this. There's very few examples historically of teams just sort of like being put together on the fly and then being able to overcome the fact that they don't really know how to play well together against this elite of the elite.
Yeah, so like yesterday I went in and I was looking at like some of what the Lakers did with Jokic in that game the other day to try to determine whether or not like Jokic was making bad passes or if there just weren't passing lanes. And all of the Jokic turnovers, I saw one bad pass. The rest of them were like perfectly timed rotations where they're waiting for Jokic to spin out and then the double team comes, and as soon as the double team comes, someone steps into the passing lane. They were passes that were open and then were closed, and it was perfect timing, perfect execution, all of that stuff. The solution to that is because a lot of the time, for example, you're putting like one that's in my mind, like right off the jump, is Jokic spinning out of a double team where it was LeBron and Rui Hachimura on him. And the person who stepped into the passing lane, and the passing lane was directly under the basket to cut off the pass to the dunker spot, was Luka.
Yeah.
The answer to that is you just throw it over Luka's head to someone who can sky it and just make an alley-oop. Aaron Gordon has gotten older, and his ability to just sky a ball like that isn't the same as it used to be. Peyton Watson would actually probably be really good in that spot, but
you're asking him just to jump up in the air.
Yeah,
but he's very capable of that.
With the Mavericks team, like if the Lakers approach them similarly, which I don't think that they would, because I don't think that they see Anthony Davis as the playmaker that Jokic is. and there's good reason for them not to see him that way. But like Anthony Davis is a fantastic player, but the answer to that type of ball pressure on Anthony Davis would be simple. You just throw it up in the air and let Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively jump and get it.
Yeah. You put two bigs in there and throw balls at the rim.
Yeah.
Two bigs who are going to jump higher than the rest of the Mavericks, the Lakers team, and say, "Let's have this. Let's have fun with this."
You throw it at the top of the backboard and just turn around and run to the other end of the court. Like that's all you do. Like, I don't think that that's going to be an issue for Dallas. What I do think becomes a problem is that my feeling is the worst matchup for Dallas is probably Denver.
Yes.
I think that most likely the idea for for Dallas is going to be you put Daniel Gafford directly on Jokic with AD coming over as a help defender. I think that strategy has been disproven in LA.
Yes.
Like Jokic has already proven that like he can handle two defenders with AD being the help defender.
He kind of just like paws him like a bear, like just stay away over there.
Yeah, and he finds he just finds the pass and makes it. Like I think there has to be more moving parts to disrupt that for Jokic. But with all that said, I think that there is a strong possibility that Dallas could just fully healthy overwhelm Denver at all of their spots on the court. And I would also add that I think that the type of defenders who can give Jamal Murray some problems are the Max Christie, PJ Washington types.
Mm-hmm.
So I once again, I think the argument for Dallas is actually pretty simple. It's almost self-explanatory.
Yes.
The question is not just will they be healthy, but will they be healthy in time to build some chemistry and all get on the same page and be able to make this work and be able to play versatilely, and not just one style of basketball, which is not going to work in the playoffs. So their ability to adjust. I don't have any concerns about Jason Kidd's ability to think up adjustments, but the ability to implement them on such a short runway, I think that could be problematic.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing. I'll go as far as saying at a full strength Dallas with a runway and like chemistry built together is probably the best team in the West, in my opinion. Right? I would say that, and I'm now like again it's all theoretical because we've never seen this team. And so but I do think that like they're very complete. But like it's like even in the best situation, their issue is going to be they are going to be playing elite teams every single time, every single matchup.
I mean, the other problem Dallas has is Dallas versus OKC. Who's the best player on the floor?
Shai.
Dallas versus the Lakers. Who's the best player on the floor?
Luka. I mean, that's what I was saying.
Who's the second best player on the floor?
I mean, probably LeBron. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that to me becomes the problem with the defense wins championships mentality that Nico Harrison said he had, is that yes, scoring points also wins championships.
Well,
and
it's also a misunderstanding of what their model is going to be the Celtics team from last year, and then you go back and it's hard to find these teams out of history because they don't typically win, but the best other example is probably the 04 Pistons.
Yeah, I was about to say the Pistons.
But the problem that Pistons
I don't like the analogy to the
It's
Celtics
not a good analogy. They also had 4 legit all-stars like on that team.
Every goddamn person on that team can shoot the three.
Yeah, and it's like that team was like hilariously deep. Like if you look at them, like it's and they had 4, and I think they have 3 dudes in the Hall of Fame from that team. Like that's not a may not have like it. And like the Celtics last year, it's also a misunderstanding. Celtics would go in a lot of series with not the best player, but then you would go 2 through 4, 2 through 5 would be all Celtics. You know what I mean? Like, so like that kind of offsets it, and that's not necessarily the case when we're talking with Dallas. And so but like it's going to be interesting. I think that they definitely have a path. The sooner they're able to get their players back from injury, be better for them. And but they are this is at full health. This should be a really really good team, and I think that's important not to get forgotten in the discussion when we talk.
No,
about
I agree. I mean, they're a really good team. The other issue I think that you've got to mention is that what we're talking about with the fully healthy Dallas team is the two big lineup where AD has realized his fantasy of playing the four again.
Yes.
And I say this as someone who actually likes Anthony Davis. I never really got in my feelings about him leaving the Pelicans, and I followed him with the Lakers. Anthony Davis is a streaky mid-range shooter. Like there are nights where he is killing it from that spot. And I'm not going to argue that if you play him there more, where he's consistently shooting more from there, that he could be better at that, perhaps. I do not see the world in which Anthony Davis becomes a significant threat from the three-point line. He's a 31% three-point shooter this season.
Mm-hmm.
The spacing on the floor for that team with two bigs is going to be problematic, I suspect, especially without being able to work it out, because Anthony Davis's ability to stretch the floor is not as significant as I think a lot of people are making it out to be. And if you end up playing one of those bigs off the floor and Anthony Davis moves to the five, you've effectively compromised the strongest advantage that you built this team to have. And in a playoff scenario, that could end up being catastrophic. I mean, honestly, I kind of think that that's a little bit of what happened with the Timberwolves last year against Dallas. And that was with a player who can stretch the floor effectively, and Karl Anthony Towns. Anyway, we mentioned that Dallas's biggest matchup problem is perhaps the Nuggets. I think that a lot of that is based off of the fact that the Dallas Mavericks are trying to play a big style basketball, and if you're playing that style of basketball, Denver is also centered around their five, and it's hard to imagine anyone being able to play that style of basketball better than Denver. And when you top that argument off with the fact that Anthony Davis has been utterly dominated by Nikola Jokic over the last 3 years, it kind of strengthens the argument a bit.
It's funny also because the thing that has always cracked me about that matchup is every game would go the same way. The Nuggets would kind of sleepwalk the first half. The Lakers would get to a big thing, and the Nuggets would be like, "All right, let's wake up now." And then they would go on a run and they win, and it was the same. It was the same game over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like to me, that was kind of one of the reasons why the Lakers' victory over the Nuggets was a little more significant than I even thought about while I was sitting down watching it. Was that the Lakers have just been so dominated by the Nuggets that it's an entirely different matchup now, and it's a matchup that's centered around advantages for the Lakers versus advantages specifically for the Nuggets, which is trying to play through AD. That was playing the Nugget style of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's just an entirely different world. And Dallas has kind of stepped into the world that LA was in to a certain extent. And the Nuggets, I think, who would be the toughest matchup for the Nuggets?
I mean, the easy answer is the team that beat them last year, which gives them problems they just get frustrated against. It's the Timberwolves. I would say that and even this year,
they missing a big piece of what caused that.
They are. It's a very different team. I think when you look at the Nuggets, to me, their case is you can say we're bringing all these weapons to the fight, and they're like, cool, we got Nikola Jokic. You have anything else? I mean, okay, we can cook something up. We can,
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the only reason we're talking about them.
Yes.
I mean, if you take Nikola Jokic away from that team, they're not even part of the conversation.
They're a hilarious team otherwise.
They're an awful team. In fact, that kind of ends up being the concern. Is there enough around Jokic? Yeah.
Yes. No, this is, and I think that their lineup wise, if everyone's playing well on their team, one of the things that makes them unique is they're big. They have players who can go on transition. They can pass. Like they have a lot of shooters, and um, and like so like they may not have like the like greatest second player, but what they do again, what they did especially in their finals, the year they won the NBA championship, is they had enough secondary scoring that like what's Jamal Murray may not have it tonight, but this is the night that Aaron Gordon got hot, or this is the night that Michael Porter Jr. got hot, and that was how they were able to sort of knock it back. But it all with this team, as you said, this all comes back to Jokic. When we saw, I think because they lost to the Timberwolves, people forgot that he won 3 games in that series literally by himself. There was one, I think it was the game. It was the game 4 or game 6 or game 6, or when they went, he just single. He was like 16 for 24, had a bunch of post plays. There was a bunch of different videos of like his post moves against both of them. Like when he's at his best, there is nothing you can do against him. And because you can take things away and he can just compensate, and if he's playing well, he can take 15 threes and beat you that way. If you're going to play it, if you're going to swarm him, if the team is playing well and he's on if the team's in a groove, he can hit every pass in the book. Like he is, because of his height and his his vision, his passing ability. Like we've never seen a passer like him before. We've seen other great passers in different ways, and I'm not saying he's the best passer, but he passes in such a unique
You've never
style.
seen anyone who can pass anything like him out of that position.
Yeah, at that position, and so he's such a unique card in his own right. Now the big question, the red flag for this team has been that they've had a tendency this year to do really well against bad teams and lay eggs against good teams, or being consistent. They've won some games against good teams, but like they'll go in there and like when they lay eggs, it's not like they lost 106 to 99. It's like 20-point demolishings, and like the team has consistently looked to me when I watch them like a team that is not in sync, or and like something looks off. I think you are correct to identify that they are an older team now. Like Gordon is not like old by NBA standards; he's 29, 30, but like he's probably diminished a little bit athletically, and that changes the game a little bit. Murray I'm still like he's playing a lot better than he was at the beginning of the year. I still have concerns about his ability to create separation this year. He is shooting better this year from the beginning, but like his ability to just beat you off the drive like he used to do, he doesn't do that as much anymore. And now he has had a tendency to raise his play significantly in the playoffs, so I don't want to discount that. But when you're making the case for Denver, you have to kind of like pull off the like argument version of a parlay where like you have to put a bunch of things that go right. Jokic has to do well. Murray has to go back to a Murray who can beat players off the dribble. Porter has to hit a lot of 3-pointers, and Gordon has to, and like the team has to play in sync. And that's kind of, it's quite possible they won a title doing that just 2 years ago.
I mean, I think with the Murray piece, like I'm willing to say, like, look, I mean, I think that we have a view or a vision of Jamal Murray that's playoff Murray.
Yes.
And we kind of expect that level of play from him throughout the entire regular season. But the truth is we've never gotten that.
No, never in his entire career.
He has never been an all-star. Now, if playoff Murray played that way throughout the regular season, he'd be a multi-time all-star.
He probably won an All-NBA third team or something like that. Like,
yeah. But he never plays that way in the regular season. And so, like, I'm perfectly willing to say it's a fair expectation of Jamal Murray that he will step up his play in the postseason.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem saying that because he's done it virtually every year. Now, the caveat to that is all the questions about Jamal Murray started in last year's postseason.
Yes.
And so if you see him revert back to what you saw last postseason,
no shot.
Yeah.
It's just done. It's over.
The
They'll win a series. They might even get to the Western. They might even they could plausibly, but they're not winning the West. They just don't have enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
The the Oklahoma City Thunder would swallow him up. Minnesota would still swallow him up because all the guys who did that to him last year are still
Still
there.
there.
I don't think that the Lakers would really swallow him up. I think the Lakers would have a different approach based on how they played the other day, where they seemed to be fine with Jamal Murray beating them and focusing
Yeah.
more on Jokic. I think that Golden State would pose significant problems for Jamal Murray. Um, Probably not to the degree that OKC or Minnesota would. And then I think that Dallas with PJ Washington and Max Christie could cause problems for Jamal Murray. I think Dallas is actually, the more I
Dallas is
think,
a really rough matchup for them. They're just so big
yeah, like
that
earlier we said OKC. I mean, we said that Dallas's worst matchup might actually be Denver. I think that like actually is just an interesting matchup. I'll change my opinion of that because I think Dallas can completely swallow up
they
Jamal
they
Murray.
both have significant advantages against each other.
Yes.
And so it's one of those matchups where until we're able to see this how the series progresses, it's hard to tell where it's going to
Yeah.
go because it's hard to tell which advantage is going to overwhelm the other one. Those type of series is actually they tend to be very interesting, but they tend to be over very fast. And I think that I think Golden State is I think they're just too big for Golden State. Just to be quite honest, I think they would kind of pulver. I think that one of the issues Golden State will have is that Curry is the type of player that Murray tends to sort of torch at this point, and they can compensate a little bit. I don't think they have the size, and Jokic has repeatedly just sort of you know wrecked them. Just to be when they've played each other, he's just too big for them. I think that Houston's the same thing. They're just too big for Houston. Michael Porter Jr. is bigger than anyone on the on the Houston Rockets that they play. Yeah, that's just a significant issue. That is so those type of matchups work well. I think the Kings, that's another one that they can roast. But once you get to the second level of teams, like the really elite teams in the West, I think that I have yet to see this year. I think they can be. I think that I can absolutely create you a scenario where Jokic, he plays 7 games against the Lakers. He figures out how this matchup works, and then once he's figured that out, the Lakers are kind of he's able to just counter anything they throw at him because he processes so fast. He can pass through stuff. They find a way to get the ball to him. They just out execute the Lakers defense. I can absolutely see that. Do I think it's likely? I think that series is actually a really, really competitive one. But that is the thing that could happen. I think against the Timberwolves, you just run that series and Jokic, because they don't have Anthony Towns, he's just too big for the both. For Reed and Reed, Randall, and Gobert, and that one that's the case in the series is probably yeah.
Well, I think that OKC and the Lakers kind of have similar approaches to Jokic in that the idea is blitz him and just get him off the ball.
Yes.
And the way that you do that is not by swarming him with people like Daniel Gafford and Anthony Davis, who don't have as good a hands as Lou Dortz and people like Jalen Williams and people like that, who are much better at actually swiping at the ball and forcing Jokic to actually get the ball out of his hands. I think Jokic is much more patient with the type of ball pressure you get from a Anthony Davis or a Daniel Gafford than he is some of these ball hawking big perimeter player types.
It's his secret against bigs. The thing that one of the things that Davis has and great rim protectors have is they intimidate. Their shot blocking ability gets big second guessing, gets them frazzled, gets them to shoot too quick, gets them to move things. Jokic does not care if you block his shot. He just grabs the rebound and goes up again. And if you block it a second time, he just patiently works it through. And so that the intimidation aspect is completely neutralized with
Yeah,
bigs. He does not. He does not. He's just going to do it again, and he's not going to change up his strategies because you blocked his shot once.
He is also like when you watch him against Anthony Davis and even these when you throw two bigs at him. I mean, like there's a lot of talk about what Minnesota was able to do with Jokic. Jokic was the best player in that series last year. Jamal Murray was the weak. Yeah, Jamal Murray was the weak link. I mean, hell, you had Anthony Edwards in the middle of the series calling Nikola Jokic the best player in the world, and being perplexed by it. Part of it is how how skilled Nikola Jokic is with his footwork.
Yeah.
The thing that happens when you swarm him with more of the large ball hawking perimeter defender types is they're better at staying in front of him and just keeping pressure on the ball itself and forcing it out of Jokic's hands. The common denominator between which, like we said earlier, OKC and LA ran two very different strategies with the same goal against Denver. But the common denominator between those two was that Nikola Jokic put the ball into his teammates' hands, and they weren't able to overcome the compromised defense. Like that ends up becoming the issue. And so the question with Denver is really just, can the pieces around Nikola Jokic step up and take advantage of opportunities that are presented by defenses that are selling out against Jokic? The only team in this bunch of teams, I think there are two in the Western Conference that can potentially face Denver without completely selling out against Jokic, and that's Dallas and Minnesota. They can do,
and they both designed themselves specifically to not have to sell out. That's their entire theory of the case. Yes.
Yeah, and so like but even then, like I think that the argument in favor of the OKC, Golden State, LA approach to Nikola Jokic versus the Minnesota LA approach to Jokic is, okay, well, y'all are trying to play Nikola Jokic's style of basketball. You're not going to beat Nikola Jokic at that style of basketball. How do I know that? You've never fucking done it. Like,
when at his peak, he's never been it. Yeah.
I mean, that's more applicable to LA than it is to Anthony Davis than it is to Minnesota. But once again, it wasn't your ability to overcome Nikola Jokic. It was your ability to completely relegate Jamal Murray to a shell of himself.
Yeah, to the point where he's throwing shit from the sidelines.
Like literally throwing shit at the refs. Like, I mean, he lost it.
He's like, and that has been the consistent question with this team since they won the title. The bench is atrocious. It is arguably the worst bench in the league.
Well, it's been the consistent question since they won the title, and that question has gotten louder and louder based on failings of the front office.
Yes, and so they have the players. It requires everyone playing. Like, it requires a lot of players playing really elite. Like, they have their top five can win a title. Like that. But their bench is so bad that it makes it really rough because they lose the non-Nikola Jokic minutes by a lot. They tend to. And I think that one of the issues that they're going to have is in the playoffs last year, what ultimately undid them was, as you mentioned, that Jokic, they never, against the Lakers, they got good performances from Porter Jr. in particular, and then Murray would pop up in the final minutes of the games.
Murray didn't particularly play well against LA either. He just hit really big shots. Your memory of that series for him.
Yeah, it warped the memory. In fact, he played very poorly in that series overall. But in the round against Minnesota, no one else on that team played well, and it wasn't because they were all being forced into bad shots. Murray would. It was they never got a game where they had they were able to get two other players on that entire team play well at the same time with Jokic. That was the cause of all four of their losses. Jokic played well in every single game. In the games they won, they got a couple of, they would, like Porter Jr. would have a good game or Gordon would have a decent game. But then in the other ones, it was just he was by himself. And that, when we saw against the Lakers was just as you said, no, like they didn't, the rest of the team didn't step up. Now, some of that, is that they were being like I think they were very much caught off guard. It was very clear that they were like, what the fuck's this defense? And they were just sort of dealing with that, and and so like you would expect over a series them to make some adjustments, but you're asking a lot from, in particular, Murray and Porter Jr. Those two have to be consistently good, and this season they both had their ups and downs. Porter Jr.'s been on a relatively good streak, but that's a lot to ask, and it's it is.
For two playoff series, it's a lot to ask.
For two playoff series, and they don't have any margin of error with their bench. That is, they have no, like, they don't have. There's not going to be a game in the series where some dude's going to come off their bench and get 15 points. That is just not and they're trying like wild shit, like DeAndre Jordan still playing like legitimately key.
They have no backup big for Nikola Jokic other than him. I mean, Sark doesn't even play. So
they had a player in a major game get 4 fouls in 2 minutes. That was one of the funnier things I've ever seen.
No, he had 5 fouls in 6 minutes. Julian Strawther. Yeah, he had 5 fouls in 6 minutes against the Lakers. It was unbelievable. All right, so look, we've run through it all. I mean, just to very briefly recap, I think we both believe the Lakers are going to have a juggernaut offense, and they've demonstrated somehow an ability to have a good defense despite the personnel. And really the only question is that sustainable, and can it transition to different matchups? I think we both believe Golden State is going to be a lot better than anybody expected them to be. And I actually think they could be one of the more interesting teams in the Western Conference playoffs this year. And Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry pair very well together, especially with Draymond Green.
They could absolutely be in the finals, just randomly in the finals, and people and you're like, what the fuck was that?
And the crazy thing about Steph Curry being in the finals is Steph Curry can have a really hot series in the Western Conference Finals. That team could mess around and sneak into the finals.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Because he more so than any player in the league at this point. If he's hot, the game's over. It's just, because he will, like, Steph Curry hot is not, 5 for 9. It's like 12 for 17.
Yeah. No, he can just torch you. I mean, OKC, I think the answer to how they get to the Western Conference Finals is almost just self-explanatory, and the question is whether or not they have, we know what their ceiling is because they play that way virtually every night. The question is teams elevate their level of play, how much higher can OKC go? Because they're going to have to go higher. Dallas could very well be the best team in the Western Conference. It's just hard to kind of judge it because we've not seen it any more than 3 quarters against a team that's just much smaller than them. And you could easily see like it being a problem where like the personnel is actually fine. The roster construction's fine. It's just that you didn't have any kind of runway to build anything with them before the playoffs started.
You could look up and they're starting Pop Spencer Bonsu at center, and you're like, what happened here?
Yeah. I mean, like getting healthy is the number one question for Dallas. But beyond that, I think the question is going to be with a short runway, are they able to build the type of chemistry you need to win multiple playoff series and make the Western Conference Finals? And can they figure out the spacing with a quasi stretch 4 in Anthony Davis? Another big occupying the floor at the same time. And if they can't and they're forced to go back to just one big, they've sacrificed the primary advantage that they traded a generational talent to acquire, which I think could end up being really problematic. And then finally, with the Nuggets, I mean, really the question mark, I mean, there are 5 players on the team. There's one person we have 0 questions about. And, the other 4 on the floor with them, we have significant questions about.
Yeah.
And so, like, really, it's just can they answer those questions and play at the level that they need to play to complement Nikola Jokic? If they can, then Denver is most certainly a contender in the West. But I think that pretty much covers the Western Conference. We're going to circle back and do this with the Eastern Conference, which I think is actually a little more cut and dry than the Western Conference. I mean, I feel like we're splitting the atom here with trying to figure out. Do you care to take a guess as to what two teams out of these five will be in the Western Conference Finals?
Yes, I will have right now the Lakers and the Nuggets.
Oh, wow. I'm going to go with sort of the Adam Silver wet dream.
Dallas and LA?
No, Lakers and Golden State. Curry, LeBron. I think
I think Silver would like not even televise the Eastern Conference Finals. He's like, fuck the Eastern Conference. This is all we care about. Yeah.
I mean, I think the crazy thing about those two guys is that like they're single-handedly like carrying the league and have for decades. And at the same time stifling the league from moving forward because like they're LeBron's 40, Steph's what, 36, 37?
He's 37 years old.
Yeah, they're 37
like,
and
we talk
40.
about LeBron's longevity, like Curry's longevity is like
yeah. And here's the crazy thing, man. Like, I think Steph has struggled a little bit this year, but in all fairness to Steph, like he's been on a team where it's literally just him. He's just running around.
My joke of him being chased by like four people is literally what happens in those games. It's just like three dudes running after him as he's 100%.
You remember when Chet Holmgren was trying to intentionally foul Derek Lively last year in that playoff? That's what Steph looks like the whole game.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like Steph has definitely taken a tick down in efficiency, but I think a lot of that can just be attributed to the fact that teams are just so squarely focused on him as the only scorer on that team that he will benefit so much from Jimmy Butler being there. And LeBron, quite honestly, has been great all year, and he's going to benefit immensely from having Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. I mean, if you really go back to when the Lakers streak started, a lot of it was when they just moved Austin Reeves over to the primary ball handler and play creator to initiate the offense. And it gave LeBron a little bit of a breather so that he could act more rejuvenated or play more rejuvenated. But I think that what you're going to see moving forward is both of those guys being fresher because their teams are asking less of them. Mm-hmm. And I think that like, I mean, I'm not diminishing the role that Luka would have to play in order to get them to that point, but I just think it's stunning that at 37 and 40 years old, you're not a crazy person to say that these two guys are once again going to face off in the Western Conference Finals.
Yep. No, I agree. And critically, both these trades reset the narratives in these franchises that had been toxic for years. Both of them were like on the decline, had outside events that are like sort of poison stuff. Lakers mostly because they were constantly trying to trade people and not trading them, and so all their team players were like, "Fuck, I don't want to be here anymore." And the Warriors because they were committing battery, during team practices and which and sort of poisoning the locker room environment. But these two trades have been a hard reset, and you can see both teams. Like, it's a small thing, but it's not. They're smiling a lot more.
Yeah.
Both teams are like, this is like, it's a clean break, a fresh start, and both teams wanted this and needed this. And I think that carries a lot for teams but especially for teams that have been worn down over years of just like, both teams have been soap operas for now like 2-3 seasons, and they needed something to reset that because that type of just like that atmosphere is poisonous.
Well, Steph and LeBron and Draymond, like, I mean, honestly, Anthony Davis, like, they all knew, like, they hadn't been able to get there the past few years if if we're not changing anything, we're going to keep getting the same result. We're not getting better. Like, so just changing something and bringing in someone who can have an immediate impact like Luka and Jimmy Butler immediately changes everything. And they're going to have a reinvigorated sense of hope moving forward. And players like that feeling that way are dangerous. So, all right, man. Well, hey, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're going to continue to ramp up our coverage of the NBA as the playoffs approach, and continue to provide really in-depth analysis like this. And we look forward to next time when we talk about the Eastern Conference. Take care.
Peace.